For Gorton. The question is the bill be read a second time, and I call the member for Grey.
Thank you, Speaker. I do like to speak on this appropriation bill. And, Speaker, the Albanese government has made history as the highest spending government outside of a pandemic in 40 years. And in coming years, it is projected they will break their own record. I've said it many times and I'll keep saying it. This Labor government is run by politics, not by policy, and they have no respect for the taxpayer. They answer only to their union boss. They have no respect for the small business owner. The national accounts show this. The government debt shows this. Our inflation shows this, the highest in the OECD. Spend, 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 and then one day the next Liberal national government will fix it. Spending as a percentage of GDP is predicted to reach 26.9% at the end of this financial year. Now, Speaker, 26.9% spending as a percentage of GDP. More than $250 is spent by this government in our economy. That is ridiculous, and it is not good enough. This is big government territory. Now, this government is running deficits because record levels of revenue are being outstripped by record levels of spending and record levels of spending growth. This socialist Labor government are breaking records all around at the cost of Australians. Speaker, these spending habits do not reflect the restraint that the Treasurer so often speaks about. This restraint is setting up the next generation to pay off even more Labor debt. $1.2 trillion of debt. $1,200 billion. $1,200 million. That's how much money this is. Now, that's a lot of money, but it's hard to comprehend what that means on a per-worker basis. If I take the South Australian Labor government debt and the Australian Labor government debt, and I combine it by the workforce, we reached a milestone in 2025 in South Australia. Over $100,000 per worker on their individual government debt credit card. Every South Australian worker owes their government now more than $100,000 in debt. That is significant, and that will be paid off by their children and their children's children. Until Pyro Jim gets spending under control, Australians will keep paying through higher prices, higher mortgages and weaker living standards. This is the first generation in Australian history where your children are more poorer than yourselves, and that is unacceptable. Labor's reckless spending habits are also part of the reason the RBA have raised interest rates again. The Treasurer has got his foot on the gas, government spending. The RBA have their foot on the brake, raising interest rates. And, Speaker, if you press the gas and the brake too hard, what do? Well, you do a burnout, Speaker. Maybe we start calling our Treasurer Burnout Jim. The RBA raised interest rates in February by 25 basis points, making it now to sit at 3.85%. And Speaker, pundits predict the RBA will increase rates again at the next meet, and then even again at the next meet after that, putting more pressure on your mortgage repayments, putting more pressure on the cost of everything. At the House Economics Committee on February 6, the RBA Governor said, to the extent that aggregate demand is above aggregate supply, which we think it is, that's contributing to inflationary pressures. And mathematically, you're right, public spending and the private sector, all of that adds to demand. The government cannot escape the laws of economics. Higher government spending always results in higher inflation. Higher inflation demands higher interest rates. And Speaker, I always come back to my high school economics teacher, Economics 101. Thank you, Mr Maguire. Governments act in a counter-cyclical fashion to the private sector, Speaker. When the private sector is doing poorly, government spends more. When the private sector is doing well, government restrains. Well, what have we seen with this government? Spend, 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 spend. Inflation through the roof, debt through the roof. It is simple as that, Speaker. After nearly 4 years of Labor, Australians are paying more for everything because of Labor's reckless spending, fuelling the inflation fire. Insurance is up 39%. Energy is up 40%. Mind you, the $275 reduction in our power bills never came. Rent up 22%. Health up 18%. Education up 17%. Food up 16%. Throw on the recent floods in outback South Australia, causing some councils to estimate $10 million in damage, with no support announced at the state or federal level. Or how about the recent fuel shortages, causing transport operators to pay more than $1,350 on fuel? That is a 38% increase on what they were paying just last week. These figures add up when Australians are being forced to pay more for essentials because of this government's spending habits. You only have to look at Labor's upgrade to the BOM website to see how they manage their money. $96.5 million for a website upgrade. And Speaker, my fiancé builds websites. The cheapest website is about $2,000. The Rolls-Royce website is about $40,000. How on earth did the Bureau of Meteorology spend $96.5 million on a website that no one asked for? And indeed, there was clearly no user acceptance testing, because the farmers that I speak to don't use it, they don't like it, and we've had to reinstate the old one and share that link with all of my community. This waste of taxpayer money has resulted in our primary producers, the backbone of our economy, having an important resource taken away. That mistake was completely unacceptable use of taxpayer money by Labor, and it's just one example. And Speaker, I've been fighting for a Doppler radar on the Lower Eyre Peninsula. Minister Watt told me there is, quote, no capacity. To be frank, no capacity is political speak for no cash. However, it is the same how is it that this government can spend so much money yet not spend any of it where it is actually needed, on physical infrastructure like Doppler radar as opposed to an expensive website? Labor's out-of-control spending is hurting all Australians by fuelling higher inflation and higher interest rates. Australia's inflation rate is now higher than the United Kingdom, the United States, Canada, Japan, Germany and so many other countries. This is a problem specific to Australia, fuelled by government spending being the highest in 40 years outside of a recession. Highest in 40 years outside of a recession. Why is it that we are the only country with this problem? The worst part is that Labor have been warned by industry experts. This is not new news. AMP Chief Economist Diana Messina confirmed it when she said, quote, "It appears that directly the government has been adding to inflation in recent years, as you would expect in an environment of public spending lifting to a record high." AMP Chief Economist Shane Oliver only last week said, quote, "A lot of factors driving inflation relate to government spending." IMF Investors Chief Economist Alex Joyner said, quote, We already have fiscal policy getting looser, but it could be even looser than we expect. The fiscal guardrails have come off." End quote. HSBC Chief Economist Paul Bloxham said, "The primary driver to the pickup in inflation is not strong demand. To the extent that demand is playing much of a role, it is that public demand growth has been strong due to government spending." End quote. The government has lost support from its friends in the industry super sector. Spending growth is running at 4 times the rate of growth in the economy, and debt under the Albanese government is set to reach $1.2 trillion. Spending is now $160 billion higher than when this government came into office. That is $16,000 for every household in Australia. Since coming to office, the Albanese government has added $100 billion to the national debt. That is impacting Australians. And Speaker, we saw some new news come out last week that Australia has the highest rates of bureaucrats per capita. Another interesting point. Australians are spending $50,000 a minute on the interest of Labor's debt alone. $50,000 a minute. I'm sure that's increasing as well. Under Labor, Australians are worse off. Under Labor, living standards have declined. Australia has the biggest fall in living standards in the developed world. As Liberals, we stand for lower inflation, lower interest rates and lower taxes. You will always get that from the Liberal Party. It is clear Labor's reckless spending is keeping inflation higher for longer. We will fight for lower costs and disciplined economic management. Disciplined economic management. We must unapologetically we must defend Australian values, Speaker. It's getting late in the day. We want our country once again to be one of opportunity and aspiration. All Australians, especially young Australians, deserve the stability that comes from owning a home. They deserve the opportunity it provides. They cannot do that under Labor with their reckless spending habits. We will reduce financial pressures for families, expand childcare choice and give children the best start in life, not force every family into a universal system. We will fix Labor's bad taxes, including a tax on your home, a tax on your super, a tax on you and your children's future. We'll get rid of Labor's carbon taxes that are pushing up the costs of food, cars and housing. We know the government must live within its means, so Australians have the means to live.
Order. It being 7:30, I propose the question that the House do now adjourn, and I call the member for